Hello everybody, Mr. Lake here with a slightly different chemistry video. Today, I'm going to introduce you to some of the most important groups on the periodic table. Not all of them. If you're a chemistry professor at a college watching this, please don't be mad at me for not identifying every single group on the periodic table. This is intended for my introductory chemistry students who are just learning the periodic table for the first time, and some of the groups that will just be mentioned or referenced often throughout the class. We've got some soothing music going on here because we're going to be doing a little bit of art, and I want to do this Bob Ross style. And so, of course, you can follow along with me if you like. Now, one of the first things that you should know about the periodic table is that, just like any table, it is split up into columns and rows. But in chemistry, we have special names for those. So we call the columns, come on, pen, there we go. We call the columns groups, or sometimes families. And we call the rows, sometimes we call them rows, but sometimes we call them periods, because it's the periodic table. The columns are numbered 1 through 18 from left to right. So if anyone ever references, group 9 on the periodic table, they're talking about this column right here. The rows are labeled 1 through 7. Top to bottom. In addition, you should know that, just kind of getting the lay of the land here, this section of the periodic table down here is a cutout. It really belongs right here in this section here. That's why the numbers here jump from 57 to 72 and 89 to 104. It's because 58 through 71 is down here, and 90 through 103 is down here. So these belong in here, but we've taken them out because that makes the periodic table a little easier to fit onto a rectangular sheet of paper. So this is actually periods 6 and 7 down here as well. Continuation, since these belong in the periodic table. Just something to be aware of. We're not going to talk about these elements that often in this class, but it's something that you should be aware of. Now, we need to talk about metals and nonmetals, because this is something that will be really, really important to be able to identify once we start talking about bonding, which is going to be very soon. So to tell where the metals and the nonmetals are on the periodic table, you've got to draw a happy little staircase. Starting in this corner, the upper left corner of boron. And you're going to draw a line down and then to the right, down and then to the right, all the way down to the ground floor. Happy little staircase. Basically, everything to the left of this are the metals, and everything to the right are the nonmetals. With the exception of some of the elements that fall along the staircase itself, because just like with anything, often it's not a clean transition. So there are true metals over on the left, true nonmetals on the right, and then the things in between are going to kind of straddle the difference. They're going to be in between a metal and a nonmetal. So any element that touches the staircase, with the exception of aluminum, because aluminum is a metal, any element that touches the staircase is what we call a metalloid. These are semiconductors. They're often used in technology and that sort of thing, especially silicone. And they are the difference between, they're kind of in between metals and nonmetals. But really, you need to be able to, you need to remember that these are metals over here on the left, which is most of the periodic table. And then over to the right here are the nonmetals. It's going to be really important when we talk about bonding, both covalent and ionic bonding. If you're only going to take one thing away from this entire video, let it be this. However, I do want to show you a couple of other important things that you'll hear referenced often. This middle grouping right here, this middle block. Whoops, I'm being a little sloppy here. Sorry about that. These, sorry, it's hard to see on the camera. These are the transition metals. So you might be picking up on is that there's kind of like a gradient, right? We've got metals, transition metals into things that aren't really metals, but they're also not really not metals, and then things that are truly not metals. It's a spectrum. There are more designations within the metals. Technically, these are called the alkali metals. These are the alkaline earth metals. These are inner transition metals, and that's split up into the lanthanide series and the actinide series. But again, that's not something that I need you to memorize for this class. If it comes up, we'll talk about it. But right now, I just want to give you the lay of the land. It is important to note that these are the transition metals, however. Now, over here in the nonmetals, there's a couple of groups that at least I tend to reference fairly frequently. And so I want to let you know what those are. Group 17, which is the second to last column. These are what's called the halogens or the halogen group. These are some of the most reactive elements on the periodic table, especially amongst the nonmetals. And the last column, group 18, these are the noble gases, which is definitely something you should know. You should know that these are called the noble gases. It'll come up in a few different contexts. These are among some of the least reactive elements on the periodic table. Interesting that most reactive and least reactive are right next to one another. There is a reason for that, and we'll talk about it when we get into bonding and reactivity and all of that. So, those are some of the main things that I need you to know about navigating the periodic table. We'll cover more as we need to, as we get into it, but this gives us a baseline that we can build off of. So, that's it for today. Until next time, you all have a fantastic, happy little day. Take care.